Sometimes your life does not fall apart because you failed. Sometimes it falls apart because the structure you were standing on was never strong enough to hold who you are becoming. And that is the strange part. What feels like disorder may be the first honest sign that something deeper is trying to organize itself. Carl Jung understood that the psyche does not always guide us through comfort. It often speaks through disruption. A relationship ends, a plan collapses, your motivation disappears, or the identity you work so hard to maintain suddenly feels impossible to wear. From the outside, it looks like chaos, but internally, something hidden may be moving toward alignment. This is not the kind of chaos that simply ruins your life. It is the kind that exposes what was already unstable, the job that drained your spirit, the connection that depended on you betraying yourself, the version of you that kept performing peace while silently falling apart. Chaos, in this sense, does not create the truth. It removes the cover from it. Jung believed that before a person becomes whole, they often pass through confrontation with what has been ignored. The unconscious interrupts the life that no longer matches the soul, and at first that interruption feels frightening because the old map stops working before the new one appears. But that is why this moment matters. When everything feels uncertain, you may not be losing direction. You may be losing the false direction that kept you away from yourself. The hidden signal inside the chaos is this: your life may be breaking open, not breaking down. Before life starts making sense in a new way, the old order often has to lose its authority. The routines that once made you feel safe begin to feel empty. The goals you once chased start looking strangely disconnected from who you are now. Even the people who used to understand you may no longer recognize the questions you are asking. Carl Jung saw this kind of inner tension as part of transformation. The psyche does not grow by simply adding new dreams on top of an old structure. Sometimes it has to break the structure itself, because the life you built may have been organized around fear, approval, survival, or the need to belong. That is why chaos can feel so personal. It does not only disturb your schedule, it disturbs your identity. It asks why you are still holding on to things that no longer carry life in them. It reveals where comfort became a cage, where loyalty became self-abandonment, and where stability was only the absence of movement. The old order cracks because something in you has outgrown it. And even though that can feel like failure, it may be the beginning of a more honest foundation. Jung would say that the unconscious often pressures us toward wholeness, not by making life easier, but by making the false life harder to continue. So when the familiar starts falling apart, it may not mean your life is losing meaning. It may mean meaning is trying to return through a different door. Chaos becomes less terrifying when you stop seeing it only as an enemy. Not every disruption is random. Not every delay is meaningless. Not every collapse is proof that you are off track. Sometimes the disorder on the surface is what happens when the unconscious begins moving things that your conscious mind refused to touch. Carl Jung believed the unconscious was not just a storage room for forgotten memories. It was alive with symbols, instincts, fears, desires, and unrealized potential. And when a person ignores what is happening inside for too long, the unconscious may begin expressing itself through moods, dreams, impulses, tension, exhaustion, or sudden dissatisfaction with the life that once felt acceptable. This is why chaos can arrive as confusion before it arrives as clarity. You may not immediately understand why you feel restless, why certain places feel wrong, why certain conversations drain you, or why the future you planned no longer gives you energy. But underneath that confusion, your psyche may be trying to reorder your life around something more truthful. The unconscious often disrupts what is artificial. It shakes the parts of your life built only to impress others, avoid pain, or maintain an image. It exposes the choices you made to be accepted instead of alive. And when those choices begin to lose power, life can look unstable from the outside, even while something deeply necessary is happening inside. That is what makes this process so strange. You may feel like you are becoming less certain, when in reality you are becoming less controlled by false certainty. You may feel like you are losing yourself, when what you are actually losing is the version of yourself that survived by staying disconnected from your own truth. Jung's perspective helps us understand that the psyche aims toward wholeness. But wholeness is not tidy at first. It may begin with discomfort, contradiction, and the painful realization that the life you were defending was not fully yours. Chaos then becomes the pressure that forces hidden material into awareness. And once awareness begins, reorganization becomes possible. You stop asking only, how do I make this chaos disappear? And you begin asking, what is this chaos trying to reveal? That question changes everything because it turns disorder into a message instead of just a threat. When life feels out of control, you usually meet parts of yourself that were easier to ignore when everything looked stable. Impatience, fear, envy, resentment, the need to control outcomes, the quiet anger you never admitted because you were trying so hard to seem calm, mature, or spiritually above it all. Chaos has a way of pulling these hidden things into the room. Carl Jung called this hidden side the shadow. It is not simply the bad part of you. It is the rejected part. The part you learned to hide because it did not fit the image you wanted to present to the world. And when life becomes chaotic, the shadow often rises because the mask no longer has enough strength to hold everything down. This is why chaotic seasons can feel so emotionally exposing. You may discover that you are not as detached as you thought. You may realize that certain people bother you because they carry traits you have not allowed yourself to own. You may notice that your frustration is not only about what happened, but about how long you have been pretending something did not affect you. Jung believed that what remains unconscious does not disappear. It influences us from beneath the surface. So when the shadow appears, it may feel like life is getting worse, but psychologically, something important is becoming visible. The chaos is not just disturbing your peace. It is showing you what your peace was built on. Maybe you were peaceful because you avoided conflict. Maybe you were strong because you never allowed yourself to need support. Maybe you were agreeable because you were afraid of being rejected. Then chaos arrives, and suddenly those strategies stop working. You cannot perform balance anymore. You have to become honest. And that honesty is uncomfortable because the shadow does not arrive politely. It shows up through reactions you wish you did not have, thoughts you do not want to admit, and emotions that interrupt the story you tell about yourself. But this does not mean you are broken. It means the parts of you that were exiled are asking to be recognized. The hidden gift of this stage is integration. When you stop denying your shadow, you stop being controlled by it. You can admit anger without becoming cruel. You can admit fear without letting it choose your future. You can admit desire without pretending you are above wanting more from life. So if chaos is bringing out sides of you that feel uncomfortable, it may not be proof that you are failing. It may be the beginning of self-knowledge. Your life may be shaking because the version of you built on repression can no longer lead the way. There are seasons when life feels so messy that nothing seems connected. One thing breaks, then another thing shifts, then a door closes before you even understand why it opened. At first it feels random, almost unfair. But then, if you pay attention without forcing meaning onto everything, you may start noticing patterns hiding inside the disorder. Carl Jung called this synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence that connects your inner world with events in the outer world. It is not about becoming superstitious or treating every small event like a secret prophecy. It is more subtle than that. Synchronicity is what happens when life seems to mirror something happening deep inside you. Maybe you keep hearing the same message from different people. Maybe a book, a conversation, or an unexpected encounter names exactly what you have been avoiding. Maybe the same kind of conflict keeps repeating until you finally understand that the issue is not just the situation, it is the pattern your psyche is trying to make conscious. This is where chaos becomes strange. On the surface, it looks like interruption, but underneath it may be arrangement. The missed opportunity protects you from a path that was never yours. The uncomfortable conversation exposes a truth you kept delaying. The repeated frustration reveals a boundary you should have set years ago. Jung did not see the psyche as separate from meaning. He believed the unconscious speaks in symbols, images, dreams, and patterns. So when your life becomes chaotic, the question is not only, how do I fix this as quickly as possible? Sometimes the deeper question is, what keeps repeating and why does it have my attention? That does not mean every coincidence is sacred or every inconvenience is destiny. Real discernment matters. Chaos can confuse you if you become desperate for signs. But when you stay grounded, you may notice that certain events are not telling you what to believe. They are showing you what to examine. And often the pattern is not outside you. It is in the way you respond, the kind of people you chase, the kind of pressure you accept, the kind of silence you confuse with peace, the kind of life you keep trying to rebuild even after your soul has already outgrown it. So when chaos begins revealing hidden patterns, it may be your psyche trying to organize meaning from the inside out. Not by giving you a perfect answer, but by showing you the thread. And once you see the thread, the disorder does not feel as empty. It starts to look like the beginning of a map. At the center of Jung's work is the idea of individuation, the process of becoming more fully yourself. Not the version shaped only by family expectations, social pressure, old fear, or the need to be accepted. The real self, the deeper self, the one that often gets buried beneath survival. And chaos can become part of that process because it separates you from identities that no longer belong to you. You may lose interest in goals that once defined you. You may stop fitting into certain rooms. You may feel guilty for changing, even when staying the same feels impossible. This is where the pain comes in. Becoming yourself does not always feel empowering at first. Sometimes it feels like grief. You grieve the old image, the old certainty, the old relationships, the old version of life that made sense because you had not questioned it yet. Jung understood that growth often asks for a confrontation with the unknown. The old personality cannot fully guide you into the new life because it was built for a different stage. So chaos arrives, and it strips away the illusion that you can become whole while remaining unchanged. But hidden inside that discomfort is alignment. You begin making choices that feel less performative and more honest. You stop asking only, will people approve of this? And start asking, can I still respect myself if I keep living this way? That is why chaos may be a signal that your life is fitting together. Not because everything becomes easy, but because the false pieces finally stop fitting. And when what is false begins to fall away, what is real has room to take shape. I used to think chaos was only there to steal something from me. Stability, certainty, plans, people, timing. Every time life became unpredictable, my first instinct was to fight it, fix it, or force everything back into the shape I already knew. But later I started noticing something uncomfortable. The chaos was not only taking away what I loved, sometimes it was taking away what I was using to avoid myself. It removed distractions, weakened old attachments, and exposed the places where I had been calling control peace. There were moments when I lost access to the version of life I thought I needed, and I felt completely unprepared. But looking back, I can see that some of those losses created space for questions I had been avoiding for years. Who was I trying to impress? What was I afraid would happen if I changed? Why did I keep choosing what exhausted me just because it felt familiar? Through a Jungian lens, I understand now that the unconscious often speaks when the conscious mind stops listening. And sometimes it speaks by disrupting the life we refuse to question. Not to punish us, but to pull us closer to what is real. What I learned is that chaos does not always remove things because they are meaningless. Sometimes it removes them because their role in your life is finished. And when I stopped seeing every disruption as an enemy, I began to notice what the disorder was quietly making room for. I learned that not every chaotic season is a warning that life is going wrong. Sometimes it is a signal that something false can no longer stay in place. And for a long time, I could not see that because I was too busy trying to restore the version of life I had already outgrown. When I stopped fighting every disruption, I began to notice what the chaos was asking me to see. Certain relationships only survived because I kept betraying myself. Certain goals only mattered because they made me feel approved of. Certain routines were not protecting my peace. They were protecting my fear of change. Jung helped me understand that the psyche moves toward wholeness, even when the process feels uncomfortable. Life may appear disorganized on the surface, while something deeper is arranging itself underneath. The pain is real, but so is the possibility hidden inside it. So now, when chaos comes, I try not to ask only, how do I make this stop? I ask, what is trying to become conscious here? Because sometimes your life is not falling apart. Sometimes it is finally refusing to fit into a shape that was never truly yours.